Every machine NASA sends to another world carries an expiration date. Not quite a promise, but a number. A threshold past which the engineers who built it will simply shrug and say, anything beyond this is a bonus. For Opportunity, that number was 90. 90 Martian days of rolling across a rust-colored plain, sampling rock, and then slowly freezing as dust settled on its solar panels and the power bled away. It lasted almost 57 times longer than that. Opportunity touched down in 2004 and didn't go silent until 2018. It covered 45 kilometers on a planet where no one could ever repair it. Along the way, it snapped a shoulder joint, lost a steering motor, went blind in one instrument, and eventually developed what mission controllers themselves nicknamed amnesia. And still, it kept moving. This is the story of Opportunity, from the crater it landed in by pure chance to the storm that finally ended it. A lucky landing. The mission opened with a stroke of luck so unlikely that engineers still talk about it decades later. Wrapped in airbags, the lander bounced and tumbled across Meridiani Planum before settling inside a small crater only about 22 meters wide, out of a landing zone that stretched for dozens of kilometers of flat, empty ground. Opportunity had dropped into one of the only depressions for miles. Controllers called it a hole-in-one. They named it Eagle Crater, and the location mattered because craters act like windows. On a world smoothed flat by billions of years of wind, an impact crater slices down through the layers and reveals what lies beneath. Opportunity had landed with the planet's geology already exposed. What it saw there reshaped how scientists talked about Mars. Fine layers of bedrock, the kind that form when sediment settles in still water. Sulfate minerals that only form in wet environments. And scattered across the surface, small gray spheres, nicknamed blueberries, made of hematite, an iron-rich mineral that on Earth usually forms in the presence of water. Within weeks, Opportunity had built a strong case that this stretch of Mars had once been drenched, though not gently. The chemistry suggested water acidic enough to be hostile to most life as we know it. But wet was wet, and that was the question that mattered most. Deeper into the planet, Opportunity then climbed out of Eagle Crater and kept going. It spent 6 months descending into a much larger crater called Endurance, reading its rock layers like pages of a book. There it found an iron-nickel meteorite resting on the sand, the first meteorite ever identified on another planet. In 2005, it got badly stuck in a sand ripple the team called Purgatory, and freeing it took 5 weeks of painstaking centimeter-by-centimeter commands sent from a control room 200 million kilometers away. By then, nobody was counting down from 90 anymore. By 2008, Opportunity had finished exploring Victoria Crater, a 750-meter-wide basin that had taken 2 years to reach and study. Then the team made a call that looked, on paper, almost reckless. Point the rover at a crater 19 kilometers away and drive. Endeavour Crater spans 22 kilometers and dates back roughly 4 billion years, far older than anything Opportunity had examined before. Older rock meant a shot at an earlier, possibly gentler chapter of Martian history. The catch was the distance. In 4.5 years, Opportunity had covered only about 12 kilometers total. This single trek would outdistance the entire mission up to that point, across open terrain, with a rover already showing its age. The drive took 3 years. By the end, the odometer read more than 21 kilometers. A different kind of water opportunity reached Endeavour's rim in 2011 at a site named Spirit Point, in tribute to its twin rover, which had gone silent on the other side of Mars the year before. Almost immediately, the gamble paid off. A bright mineral vein, about as wide as a thumb, ran through the exposed rock. Analysis identified it as gypsum, a form of calcium sulfate that forms when water flows through a crack and leaves dissolved minerals behind as it passes. This wasn't a guess drawn from grain shapes, it was a physical scar left by flowing water. And crucially, the chemistry here pointed to water far less acidic than what Opportunity had found back at Meridiani. Later, on a rise called Matijevich Hill, the rover detected clay minerals, the kind that only form in neutral, drinkable water, in a rock nicknamed Esperance. The mission's lead scientist called it the strongest evidence for water the rover had produced in 9 years of work. Endeavour was revealing a version of Mars that was older, wetter, and more welcoming than anything seen before. So Opportunity stayed, spending the rest of its working life circling this one crater rim. A body-wearing-out machines don't age the way people do, but they do age. By the mid-2010s, Opportunity's list of injuries had grown long. A shoulder joint on its robotic arm had failed years earlier, forcing engineers to drive with the arm frozen in place, held out like a broken limb. The steering motor on the right front wheel had jammed in 2005. The left front would fail the same way in 2017, leaving the rover to spend much of its final years driving in reverse. An instrument used to read rock composition from a distance had been coated in dust during a 2007 storm and never fully recovered. A spectrometer that once analyzed samples in hours now took days. Then, starting in 2014, the rover began to forget. Its flash memory, the storage that survives being powered off like a hard drive, started to fail, causing sudden, unexplained reboots, sometimes several a day. Each one reset whatever task the rover was midway through. Engineers traced the problem to a specific bank of damaged memory cells, reformatted the drive remotely, and rerouted around the fault. It helped, but didn't fix things completely, so they made a hard decision. They switched Opportunity to run on RAM alone. RAM is volatile. Anything stored in it vanishes the moment power is cut. And Opportunity powered down every single night to survive temperatures that dropped below 70 degrees Celsius in the Martian dark. From that point on, any data collected during the day but not transmitted before sunset was lost for good. Every observation became a race against nightfall. It's worth pausing on what the team was actually working with. A solar-powered vehicle, more than a decade past its intended lifespan, with a locked wheel, a disabled arm, failing instruments, and no long-term memory. Driven across crater slopes by people who would never lay eyes on it. And they were still producing real science, a marathon and the steepest climb ever attempted. In March 2015, Opportunity's odometer crossed 42,195 kilometers, the exact length of a marathon. It had taken 11 years and 2 months, not a competitive time by human standards, but a remarkable feat for a rover meant to travel about a kilometer before dying. Back on Earth, the team marked the milestone by running a relay marathon of their own and named the valley the rover was passing through Marathon Valley. A year later, working the southern wall of that valley, Opportunity attempted the steepest climb of its entire mission, pushing uphill toward the crest of Knudsen Ridge in 2016. The rover tilted to 32 degrees, the steepest slope any Mars rover had ever attempted. It didn't reach the top. Its wheels turned enough distance to have carried it 20 meters, but the loose surface meant it actually advanced only about 9 centimeters. What it gained instead was power. Tilted so sharply toward the sun, its panels pulled in nearly 600 watt-hours a day, the best output the rover had seen in years. Marathon Valley had been chosen based on orbital data. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter had detected clay signatures there from space, and the team wanted a close-up look. Opportunity found rocks that crumbled far more easily than the tough outcrops it was used to, with compositions unlike anything nearby. Working through the valley took more than a year, since everything now moved slowly. Instruments, analysis, a computer prone to random reboots. But the science kept coming. Perseverance Valley. The rover then pushed south through a gap in the crater rim, down into a valley, toward a target the team had been eyeing for years. A gully. Gullies suggest flow. Something moved through them, and on Earth, that something is almost always water. No Mars mission had ever examined one up close, and Opportunity was about to be the first. They named it Perseverance Valley. The rover arrived in 2017 and began studying the terrain, searching for signs of ancient water versus the alternative explanations of wind or ice. It found stones lining the channels and textures, open to multiple interpretations. But in the end, no definitive answer emerged. The storm. In mid-2018, the orbiters spotted a new dust storm forming. That in itself was nothing unusual. Mars produces dust storms the way Earth produces weather fronts, and Opportunity had weathered several already. But within days, it was clear this one was different. It grew, merged with other systems, and kept expanding until it had wrapped around the entire planet. The numbers tell the story better than any image could. Atmospheric opacity is measured with a value called tau. The worst storm Opportunity had ever survived back in 2007 reached a tau of 5.5, and that had nearly killed it. This storm reached 10.8. From the surface, the sun would have all but vanished. Opportunity's power collapsed. At the start of the darkening in late May, its batteries were producing around 645 watt-hours a day. 4 days later, that had dropped to 133. Science operations were suspended on June 8th, and on June 10th, the rover sent its last transmission. A status report showing roughly 22 watt-hours of stored energy and a final image, almost entirely black, of a sky it could no longer see through. Then it went quiet. The storm lasted for months. When it cleared, mission controllers kept calling. For 8 months, they sent more than 1,000 commands. They tried during the windy season, hoping a gust might sweep the panels clean. They even played wake-up songs in the control room for a machine that could no longer hear them. In February 2019, NASA declared the mission over. Opportunity had operated for 5,111 Martian days. It had driven 45.16 kilometers, farther than any vehicle has ever traveled on another world. It sent back more than 200,000 images, and it turned a hypothesis into fact. Mars had once been a wet planet, with standing water, flowing water, and chemistry mild enough that life would not have been immediately impossible. A rover built to survive 90 days spent 15 years proving it. 90 days was the promise. 15 years was the answer.